There is a quiet pain that many chosen women carry, and it rarely comes from strangers. It comes from the people who share your blood, your history, your last name. When God places a calling on a woman's life, it does not always arrive with applause. Often, it arrives with resistance. You begin to change, to see deeper, to walk differently, and suddenly the familiar becomes hostile. What once felt like home starts to feel like a battlefield. This is not because you are doing something wrong, but because calling disrupts comfort and growth exposes insecurity. If you have ever felt misunderstood, unsupported, or subtly attacked by those closest to you, this message is not random. Chosen women are often born into environments that test their strength before celebrating their purpose. Your family may love the version of you that stayed small, silent, or predictable, but struggle with the version of you that listens to God, honors her intuition, and refuses to shrink. These signs are not meant to make you bitter, but aware. Awareness is power, and power is protection. 1. They constantly minimize your vision. One of the clearest signs is when your dreams are always treated as unrealistic, foolish, or too much. Every time you speak about what God has placed in your heart, they respond with doubt disguised as concern. Be realistic. That's not for people like us. This isn't wisdom, it's fear. Your calling threatens the limits they've accepted for themselves, so they try to shrink yours to match their comfort zone. When God gives a vision, it rarely fits neatly inside the boundaries of what people around you consider reasonable. Divine vision stretches beyond familiarity, beyond history, and beyond what has been done before in your family line. That is exactly why it unsettles those who have learned to survive rather than believe. Instead of asking how they can support you, they question whether your vision is even possible. They speak softly, but the message is loud: don't outgrow us. They may say they are trying to protect you from disappointment, but what they are really protecting is their own sense of safety. Their language often sounds practical, but it is rooted in limitation. They reference past failures, financial constraints, cultural expectations, or family history as proof that your dream is too large. Yet God has never required permission from history to do something new. What they call realism is often just resignation, a quiet agreement they've made with mediocrity. Your refusal to make that same agreement exposes the compromise they've settled into, and that discomfort pushes them to pull you back down. A chosen woman's vision is not self-generated ambition, it is assignment, and assignments from God are not meant to be validated by people who fear change. When family members consistently downplay your aspirations, it is not because the dream lacks merit, but because it demands courage they no longer want to exercise. Your belief confronts their unbelief. Your faith highlights their fear. Instead of expanding their perspective, they attempt to compress yours. This minimizing can become internalized if you're not careful. Over time, repeated dismissal can make you question what you once knew with clarity. That is why discernment is crucial. God does not reveal vision to everyone, He reveals it to the carrier. Those who are not entrusted with it are not qualified to define it. When family members continually shrink your dream, they reveal not a flaw in your calling, but a threat to their comfort. And comfort has always been the enemy of purpose. 2. They only support you when you fail. Pay attention to when they show up. If they are loud when you stumble but silent when you succeed, that's not love. It's jealousy in disguise. Your growth reminds them of what they never pursued. Failure makes them feel safe. Success makes them uncomfortable. A chosen woman's light exposes what others have buried, and not everyone is ready for that reflection. There is a subtle cruelty in selective support. These family members appear concerned when you fall, offering advice, prayers, and opinions in abundance. Yet when you rise, when doors open, when progress becomes visible, when your confidence grows, they withdraw. The silence becomes noticeable. The enthusiasm fades. Compliments are scarce, if they exist at all. This imbalance reveals a deeper issue. Your success disrupts their internal narrative. Your failure allows them to maintain a sense of superiority or relevance. It reassures them that staying where they are was the right choice. But your success challenges that belief. It asks an uncomfortable question: what if I could have done more? Rather than face that question honestly, they retreat emotionally. Some may even subtly sabotage your momentum through discouraging comments, shifting conversations back to your past mistakes, or reminding you of how easily things could fall apart. This dynamic is especially painful because family is expected to be your safest audience. Yet chosen women often discover that familiarity does not guarantee celebration. Your elevation becomes a mirror reflecting the risks they avoided and the faith they never activated. Instead of confronting their own regret, they resent your progress. The support they offer during your failures is not always compassion. It can be relief. True love rejoices in growth, even when it outpaces one's own. Jealousy does the opposite. It tolerates you as long as you remain relatable, manageable, and non-threatening. But when your life begins to testify loudly, it becomes inconvenient. Your obedience produces evidence, and evidence demands accountability. Not everyone wants to be held accountable by your fruit. A chosen woman must learn to interpret patterns, not words. Applause during failure paired with silence during success is not accidental. It is a signal, and while it hurts, it also clarifies. God will often reveal who can go with you by who can celebrate you. Those who only feel comfortable when you are struggling are not aligned with where you are going. Your light is not meant to be dimmed to preserve someone else's sense of worth. 3. They mock or dismiss your faith and discernment. When God sharpens your discernment, you see what others ignore. You feel what others numb. Family members who hate your calling will mock your spirituality, call you too serious, or say you've changed. And they're right. You have changed. You've outgrown blindness. What they call arrogance is actually obedience. Spiritual growth often creates distance before it creates understanding. As your discernment sharpens, your tolerance for dysfunction decreases. You notice patterns, motives, and energy shifts that once went unnoticed. This clarity makes others uncomfortable, especially those who benefit from spiritual ignorance. Instead of respecting your growth, they mock it. Humor becomes a weapon. Sarcasm replaces curiosity. Your depth is labeled extremism. They may accuse you of thinking you're better than everyone, when in reality, you're simply more aware. Discernment is not judgment, it is perception. But those who live unexamined lives often confuse awareness with pride. Your refusal to engage in old behaviors threatens the unspoken agreement to stay asleep together. When you wake up, it disrupts the collective comfort of denial. Faith challenges more than habits. It challenges identity. As you align with God, you stop seeking validation from familiar voices. That shift alone can feel like betrayal to those who relied on your emotional availability. They interpret your obedience as rebellion, your boundaries as rejection, and your discernment as arrogance. But obedience often looks offensive to people who prefer convenience. Mockery is a defense mechanism. It allows them to dismiss what they do not want to understand. If they can reduce your faith to fanaticism, they don't have to examine their own lack of commitment. If they can call you too serious, they avoid confronting how unserious they've been about their own purpose. Your growth exposes the cost of staying stagnant. A chosen woman must stand firm in this season. God does not sharpen discernment to isolate you, but to protect you. Not everyone deserves access to a mind that sees clearly and a heart that feels deeply. When family mocks your faith, they are revealing discomfort with divine authority operating through you. And while it hurts, it also confirms alignment. Obedience has always been misunderstood before it is honored. 4. They try to guilt you into staying small. They remind you of everything they've done for you, only when you start choosing yourself. They weaponize loyalty, culture, or obligation to keep you tied to old roles. Family comes first, they say, but what they mean is, your obedience threatens our control. A chosen woman must learn that honoring God sometimes looks like disappointing people. Guilt is one of the most effective tools used to restrain growth, especially within families. When you begin to evolve, to prioritize your calling, or to step into independence, old sacrifices are suddenly recited like debts. Support that was once freely given is reframed as leverage. The message becomes clear: you owe us your obedience. This is not love, it is control disguised as tradition. They appeal to cultural norms and emotional history to keep you anchored in roles God never intended you to occupy permanently. The caretaker, the peacemaker, the one who sacrifices last and speaks least. When you attempt to redefine your role, resistance emerges. They accuse you of forgetting where you came from, as if growth is betrayal. But growth is not erasure, it is fulfillment. Obligation becomes the language of manipulation. You are reminded of your position, your gender, your age, or your responsibilities, all framed as reasons to delay obedience. Yet God's call does not submit to human hierarchy. When divine instruction contradicts family expectation, tension is inevitable. That tension is not rebellion, it is alignment. A chosen woman must understand that guilt thrives where boundaries are weak. When you begin to say no, guilt will raise its voice. When you choose purpose over people-pleasing, guilt will attempt to shame you back into compliance. But obedience to God often requires the courage to be misunderstood. Even Jesus disappointed people who expected him to prioritize tradition over truth. Honoring God does not mean dishonoring family, but it does mean refusing to live smaller than your assignment. Those who benefit from your self-neglect will always resist your self-respect. Guilt loses its power when you recognize it as a test, not a command. You are not selfish for choosing growth. You are faithful. And faithfulness sometimes requires walking away from expectations that were never God-ordained. 5. They compete with you instead of celebrating you. Competition within family is subtle but toxic. They compare your journey to theirs, downplay your progress, or suddenly try to outshine you when you're doing well. This isn't healthy rivalry, it's insecurity. Your calling awakens a silent comparison they've been avoiding for years. Family competition rarely announces itself openly. It hides behind jokes, passive comments, sudden shifts in behavior, and quiet comparisons that drain the joy from your progress. When you succeed, instead of celebrating you, they redirect the conversation to themselves. When you grow, they suddenly feel the need to prove something. What should have been shared joy becomes a silent contest, and the atmosphere subtly changes. This kind of competition is rooted in unresolved insecurity. Your advancement forces them to confront paths they abandoned, risks they avoided, or dreams they silenced. Rather than processing that honestly, they unconsciously turn you into a measuring stick. Your progress becomes something they feel the need to match, minimize, or overshadow. They may rush to highlight their own achievements or resurrect old accomplishments to regain a sense of relevance. What makes this particularly painful is that family is expected to be a safe place, where success is shared, not challenged. But when insecurity takes root, celebration feels threatening. Your calling doesn't just elevate you, it exposes stagnation around you, and exposure often triggers defensiveness rather than humility. Healthy families inspire one another. Toxic dynamics compete for attention, validation, and superiority. The competition may look harmless, but its effects are corrosive. It erodes trust. It replaces encouragement with comparison. It teaches you to downplay your own wins to keep peace. Over time, you may find yourself shrinking your joy just to avoid tension. A chosen woman must recognize this pattern without absorbing guilt. Your success is not an attack. Your growth is not an insult. If someone feels diminished by your progress, that is an internal wound, not a reflection of your behavior. God did not bless you so you could apologize for thriving. Competition reveals misalignment. Those who are meant to walk with you will clap when you rise. Those who compete instead of celebrate are revealing that your journey has outpaced their healing. You don't need to confront this aggressively, but you do need to discern it clearly. Not everyone who shares your blood is meant to share your future. 6. They gossip about you behind your back. Instead of asking you questions, they create stories. Instead of defending you, they dissect you. When family members speak negatively about your growth to others, it reveals discomfort with your evolution. Chosen women are often misunderstood before they are recognized, even by their own. Gossip is the language of avoidance. It allows people to talk about you instead of talking to you. When family members gossip about your growth, it signals a refusal to engage with who you are becoming. Rather than seeking understanding, they choose speculation. Rather than clarity, they choose distortion. These narratives are often built on fragments of truth twisted by insecurity. Your boundaries become arrogance, your focus becomes selfishness, your independence becomes rebellion. Each story subtly reshapes your character in the minds of others, distancing you from your own reputation. This can be deeply painful, especially when the people spreading the narrative are those who know your history. Gossip is not just harmful because it misrepresents you. It's harmful because it reveals betrayal. Family members are expected to protect your name, not damage it. When they speak negatively about your evolution, they are expressing resistance to the version of you they can no longer control or predict. Your growth disrupts the image they were comfortable with, so they attempt to manage it through narrative. Chosen women often face this phase before elevation. Misunderstanding precedes recognition. Joseph was talked about before he was trusted. David was doubted before he was crowned. Gossip often emerges when purpose begins to surface, because purpose exposes motives. You cannot out-argue gossip, you outgrow it. God does not ask you to defend yourself against every false version of you circulating in insecure mouths. He asks you to stay aligned. Those who matter will seek truth. Those who enjoy gossip were never safe to begin with. Let this be a marker, not a wound. When people choose stories over conversations, they disqualify themselves from intimacy. Silence, in this season, is not weakness. It is wisdom. 7. They pressure you to abandon your boundaries. When you begin setting boundaries, they call you cold, selfish, or disrespectful. Why? Because boundaries protect your calling. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries will always resist your healing. Your peace threatens their access. Boundaries are often misunderstood as rejection, especially by those who thrived on your availability. When you begin to say no, to limit access, or to protect your energy, the reaction is rarely neutral. Resistance shows up quickly. Labels are applied. Your character is questioned. But boundaries don't change who you are. They reveal who others expected you to remain. People who benefited from your exhaustion will resent your rest. People who relied on your emotional labor will resist your withdrawal. They interpret your healing as abandonment because it disrupts the dynamic they were comfortable exploiting. But boundaries are not punishment. They are protection. A chosen woman's calling requires stewardship of energy, time, and focus. Without boundaries, purpose leaks. God often introduces boundaries before breakthrough because what He is building cannot survive constant access. When family pressures you to abandon those boundaries, they are prioritizing their comfort over your assignment. Being called selfish is often the price of self-respect. Being called cold is often the result of no longer over-explaining. Being called disrespectful is often what happens when obedience replaces appeasement. These accusations are not evidence of wrongdoing, they are evidence of change. Your peace is not negotiable. If someone only feels loved when they have unlimited access to you, that is not love. It is entitlement. Boundaries clarify relationships. Those aligned with your growth will adjust. Those threatened by your healing will protest. Let them protest. God is not offended by boundaries. He established them. Even Jesus withdrew. Even Jesus said no. Protection is not disobedience. It is wisdom. They only value you for what you provide. Notice if love feels conditional. When you stop fixing, giving, or sacrificing yourself, does the affection fade? A chosen woman is often raised to be the emotional pillar, but never the priority. When you reclaim your energy, those who hate your calling will resent the loss of control. Being valued for what you provide rather than who you are is a quiet form of exploitation. You are appreciated when you are useful, agreeable, or sacrificial, but overlooked when you need support. Over time, this teaches you to associate love with labor. Rest feels like guilt. Saying no feels like betrayal. Chosen women are often conditioned into this role early. The responsible one, the strong one, the fixer, the one who holds everyone together. But while everyone leans on you, few check on you. Your worth becomes transactional, measured by how much you give and how little you ask. When you begin to reclaim your energy, the shift is noticeable. The praise fades, the warmth cools, the connection weakens. This reveals a painful truth. Some relationships were sustained by your depletion. When you stop overgiving, the imbalance becomes visible. This resentment is not about loss of love, it's about loss of control. Your availability made others comfortable. Your sacrifice made their lives easier. Your healing disrupts that convenience. But God never intended you to be a resource without replenishment. You are not called to pour endlessly. You are called to steward wisely. Relationships that collapse when you stop over-functioning were never balanced to begin with. Let them fall. God will replace transactional bonds with reciprocal ones. They pray for you to change, but not to grow. This is the most painful sign. They say they're praying for you, but what they want is a version of you that fits their comfort. They pray for silence, not strength, for submission, not sovereignty. But God answers prayers aligned with purpose, not fear. Your calling was never meant to be negotiated. Not all prayers are aligned with God's will. Some are rooted in fear, control, or nostalgia. When family members say they're praying for you to change, what they often mean is they want you to return to a version of yourself that was easier to manage, less bold, less discerning, less obedient. They pray for you to soften, but not to strengthen, to comply, but not to lead, to settle, but not to soar. These prayers are wrapped in spiritual language, but they are motivated by discomfort with your evolution. Your growth disrupts their expectations, so they ask God to restrain what He is actually expanding. This is deeply painful because it feels like spiritual betrayal. Prayer is sacred. To realize it's being used as a tool of resistance can wound deeply. But God is not confused. He does not answer prayers that oppose purpose. He does not shrink callings to preserve comfort. Your calling was decided before their prayers were spoken. God's plans are not up for negotiation. No amount of fear-based intercession can override divine assignment. When others pray for your diminishment, God responds with confirmation. Let this be your reassurance. If God placed it in you, He will protect it through you. You don't need permission to become who He called you to be. Growth is not rebellion. Strength is not disobedience. Sovereignty is not sin. If this message reached you at a moment when you needed clarity, confirmation, or courage, know this: you are not alone. And you are not imagining the resistance. Chosen women are forged in misunderstanding before they are crowned in purpose. This is the Woman of Light channel. If this resonated with your spirit, I invite you to subscribe for more messages meant to strengthen, awaken, and guide women walking their divine path. And if you know, deep in your soul, that you received this message at the exact time you needed it, type 11 to 11 in the comment section as a sign of alignment and divine blessing. What God has called you to will not be stopped by misunderstanding, only refined by it. Thank you for watching.